I have to enjoy the whole film, and the subtitling has to be something which goes with it and which is conveying what is said and what is the cultural thing about it, which I don't see in those machine translations.
And welcome everyone to another episode of Slater Pod. Today we're really excited to have Lian Kirsch on the podcast. Lian is the CEO of Cinescript, a Berlin-based provider of audiovisual translation, subtitling, and even some very interesting interpreting work you're doing. Hi, Lian.
Hi.
So, Lian, where does this podcast find you? What country, what city? Are you in Berlin?
Yes, we're in Berlin, in Germany.
It's been a while. I was at one of the industry conferences there about 5 years ago, but need to go back.
Yes, Berlinale is over right now.
So there's hotel space available again.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, Berlinale is huge for you on the media side. All right, so tell us a bit more about your background, how you got into this business of translating, subtitling, etc., and the origin story behind the company Cinescript.
Yes, in fact, it started all out when I was finishing my studies as a philologist, studying Roman languages. And I had a friend, he was a line producer on different projects, and he contacted me and asked me if I can do a translation of a contract, which was at the time from French into German. And yes, I was working with a lawyer to make everything right, because it was really the first steps. And then I was working as a set interpreter and dialogue coach, also on several international productions at the time. They had the chance to speak all the languages. So the actors, I had Italian, French, English, and German actors, all in one film. So I was working with all of them, and I was doing the dialogue coaching and everything what was involved, caring for them also on set. And then I was also doing production assistant on different companies, film companies, so projects, and then also as a production assistant at a film production in Berlin directly for several years. Yes, that was the beginning.
I want to talk to you about the set interpreting and the dialogue coach later on, but so tell us more about how you turned this from kind of a serendipitous kind of occurrence. Okay, somebody asked you for something, and then you kind of got into that field of work. How do you made it a business with Cinescript? How did you kind of did you at some point say, well, I need to start a company and maybe hire a couple of people to do this, or what's the story behind that?
Well, this was all what I said now was happening parallelly. So the project Cinescript was already going, but since there was nobody knowing anything about me, it took about 5 years, so I had to work on the side. Then people knew a bit more of me, because in the beginning there was nothing. There was just sending 100 of real letters, and nobody came back to me. So I really had to fight for it to see how things are going. And I was working on the side, but then people came to me, knew me, and then I was also traveling in the beginning, doing working for Arte, for different projects, also for subtitling projects. And when I was doing this, I was trying to know who, for example, was ringing me for any work. So this was happening parallelly, and doing other things to get myself known.
Got it. And so now, in terms of kind of the clients that you have and the services to provide in terms of the split, so what are some of the key clients, if you can name them? Otherwise, we can just describe them. And what are like the services I mentioned, like subtitling and translations, but just kind of let's dive a bit more into that.
Yes. You mean the film and TV productions we are working with?
Exactly. So, like, who would actually be your direct client? Maybe not the end client or the end studio or something, but who would actually be engaging with you?
Yes, well, we get the requests from film and TV productions in general, and dubbing companies as well, because we're working in those three fields: pre-production, production, and post-production. Well, we're working with the Netherlands, we're working with England, Fremantle, Red Bull, Austria. Then we have Universal NBC in England, and we have Warner Media. They're in Munich, but also in England and LA. Then we have Mona Film. They are in Austria as well. In Switzerland, we have also several companies. One is coming back. It's Eight Horses. And then we have Europa Cinema in France. Those are with X Film also. Most of them, the Wiedemann and Berg, Bantry Bay, X Film, those are the ones who are more involved, and then a lot of more coming now.
Got it. Yeah, I'm sure it's busy. So when you speak to all of these international clients, do you speak in their own language to them? Because we found out that you're a polyglot. You speak, I think 8, 9, 10 languages. I'm not sure. Tell us a bit more about that. I'm curious. Like, how did you become? Like, how much time did you invest in speaking all these languages, and then how do you balance it with kind of the day-to-day business? Because I would love to learn more languages, but I'm like, when, how?
Yes, well, it started early on. I'm fluent in 6 languages. That's right. And studying now also Polish and Norwegian.
Norwegian a little easier than Polish, maybe?
That's right, yes. Polish is really the most difficult language I ever learned. It's very, very complex. But since I always have to have a notion, I have to have something which takes me to learn the languages. And in fact, it has to do with the melodies of the languages to really be able to, talk and be fluently written or in the spoken language. It's like, I think you have to know in the beginning that how to get a conversation started. You make yourself a list of questions to know a bit more from your vis-a-vis in the first place, for example. Of course, it makes it easier when you study languages like myself of the same roots, like the Roman languages, because then it's like they have similar words, and also they are more easily also to allocate the same meaning when you see them in a written form. When you hear them, then it becomes more difficult. Like there is a big difference between Portuguese from Portugal and Brazilian Portuguese in terms of pronunciation.
Yeah, you mentioned melodic language. Then Norwegian might not be the worst because it has a very kind of unique sound pattern.
Yeah, it's right. It's more. It has to be more with in the German. Like we were learning. Like I thought, because I'm coming now from the Roman languages, to go over the Roman languages, but then I found out that no, it's direct from my own mother tongue, the Indo-German. So that was an easier. But it's all of the languages are very interesting because there's a very vast background behind in terms of historic and geographic and more cultural.
Yeah, I'm so tempted now to geek out on the language learning part, but let's move on to bring this back to the translation side of things. So, tell me more about the translation of screenplays, like the process, the complexities. This is the first time, frankly, that I've heard about translation of screenplays. So tell me about who needs this, what's different, what's complex about it.
The screenplay belongs to the development of a film. So there are smaller steps until the screenplay is written. But for translator, for example, we always work with translator and proofreader. So there are 5 phases, like kind of process. It's that you have to read it first completely, then you make a first complete draft translating it. Then you go deeper, starting research and formulating more precisely. Then you're working on the dialogues. Then you're having a thorough read through and reading the dialogues out loud. That will be in the end. Then the next step is a proofreader who's getting into it. Normally we work printing the text. We don't work, and I don't like it to work on the screen because I see everything better black on white. So first we have a proofreader who is from the source language, and if it's very complex and an important screenplay, then we work with the second proofreader as of the target language. And we have to control research, rereading every sentence, comparing with the source language if everything is there, if the original ideas or idioms are understood or not, or giving also alternatives, synonyms, or correcting mistakes. Then the next step will be like the discussion between translator and proofreader. By phone it was in the good old days, nowadays it's digitally. And then in the end there is a quality assurance, which I'm doing myself, which is a final double check to see if there are any typos, misinterpretations, or still open queries or decisions to be made.
Got it. But maybe I'm a little slow before, but of course the main purpose here would be for dubbing, right? That this would go into the dubbing process, or no?
No, this is that's interesting because people ask me a lot. Also, my interns in the beginning, the screenplay is only in the pre-production, so there is no film yet. We don't have a video. It's for co-production. It's for finding actors. It's getting involved in the whole process of the development stage. Yes. So the dubbing is later on. It's much later on.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, because the film has to be shot. Then we go to the, after the pre-production, we have the production, where I said the set interpretation and dialogue coaching. And then in the end, we have the post-production with everything involved after, with the video, subtitling, dubbing, transcriptions, for example.
But then it has to be kind of an international collaboration, like a movie that crosses languages and cultures for there to be the need for the translation of a screenplay, right? So is that mostly like in a European context, or like if an American studio produces a movie, like you wouldn't need a translation of a screenplay, right?
I think everyone needs a screenplay.
A screenplay, yes, but not a translation of a screenplay.
That depends, of course, yeah. The German, for instance, the German film production companies, they only need translations if they go worldwide, for example. If they want to, as I said, to win co-producers, to have an international cast for the actors also. Yeah. This is all involved, or if they have locations, for instance, in Italy. So sometimes they need script excerpts only for the authorities. So it's only, you're right, it only has to do if it's internationally used.
Got it. Well, thanks, audience, and you for coming along my journey of ignorance here, but I think we clarified that. Another question I had, you said that there's on-set interpreting and dialogue coach. Tell me more about that. That sounds interesting.
Yes. In fact, an on-set interpreter has to be familiar with screenplays and the film language. Like he or she is doing interpreting for all crew members, especially for the director. Then between actors and director. We have in the script, we have stage directions. But the director sometimes has a certain idea of how the actor should behave in a certain scene. So interpreter has to translate everything what the director wants of the actor. Or, for example, the set interpreter also works for the cameraman. If, for example, he wants to explain the angle to the director or to others or to the actors, or the lighting technician, the costume designer, or the makeup. For instance, I did an interpreting on set that we had to go to the hairdresser, so to dye the hair of the actress in red. Yeah, so everything had to be explained. That was in France, and the actress didn't speak any French, and the hairdresser didn't speak any German. So this is all involved also by a set interpreter.
Got it. And dialogue coach, that you said that you personally did this in the past as well.
Yes, that's really something I really love to do. Is like the dialogue coach also has, of course, to be familiar with the script. As I said, when I was shooting with different actors from different cultures or countries, there were various language versions on one scene. So I had to prepare one to be shot on the same day. Then I had to coach the actors, rehearse with the actors, like taking the part, for instance, of the other actor who isn't there. But also, which is also involved, which I think was a very important part as well, is that there was also a caring for the actors. It's like when there was a pause in between the shooting, the scenes, then was conversing, checking on scenes to be shot coming up, for instance. Or what also is very important by a dialogue coach while shooting, to control what is said. And if necessary, what I also had to do once, to stop the whole shooting if anything is wrong or doesn't work.
Sounds interesting, but also stressful, I guess, if you're on the set there.
Yes, it is. That's right. Also, because there are night shootings, and we always have to prepare to see, okay, do we shoot today in the daytime or in the night, etc. So yeah, it depends. It's sometimes stressful, but it's really challenging, and I loved it because it's very, it's very lifeful, and yes, I like it.
So you've seen, the world before streaming and now, and then kind of in the middle of the streaming hype, and now almost like when streaming has become almost the default for many. Like, how have you felt the impact of this? I don't know, evolution, revolution over the past 10 years in the business and in the way you approach work, if at all?
I must admit that I'm not very much a fan of machine translation. Everything what we do is handmade and with a team and like a teamwork. I think it's more for people who don't have time to see subtitles quickly, but for me it's not fun. It's not, I have to enjoy. When I see a film, I have to enjoy the whole film, and the subtitling has to be something which goes with it, and which is conveying what is said and what it is the cultural thing about it, which I don't see in those machine translations.
I was referring to the streaming, like basically, linear TV in the past, and now, of course, everybody's on Netflix and on Disney Plus. So, do you feel that automation was something, like machine translation was something that that streaming boom brought? So it was, in the linear days, it was a lot more hand, and now we're getting a lot more automated workflows.
No, I think this is fine. I think that's something which was like a kind of showing the future already, and we're living in the future now. And it's something which I think it's going well, like with a series. We have people have a lot to say, and sometimes you can't put it just in one cinema, in one film for a cinema. So it's okay if we have several series. And the streaming platform, I think, is fine when it's well done. When we also have like the subtitling, which is conveying culturally. If it's not okay for me, and I don't enjoy it, as I said, if there is nothing passionate about it.
One project that I'm sure was very passionate is you were involved in 1899, like probably one of the most exciting series to be involved in. It was a Netflix show. Just quick reminder for the audience. Netflix 89. It was by the ship, and a lot of actors were on the ship, and a lot of people were on the ship, and they all spoke different languages, right? Because it was a transatlantic or whatever sea it was. I'm not going to spoil it here, but the point is, it was a series. Lots of people spoke very different languages, and it had to be adapted. And so, your company was involved in that. So tell me a bit more about how that worked, as far as you can disclose.
Yeah, it's like we translate. Well, we worked on it the whole time. So from 2020 until last year. And so we did everything. We did not say everything, but the whole process of introduction, like a translation of the synopsis, the outlines, then the pilot, then the screenplays. We did the polishing of the screenplays. Like there were casting texts in very different languages. It really was amazing for us. So many languages I never worked with. Was really Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, Polish, Cantonese, Japanese. And we did casting text, and we did dialogue coaching and online coaching in Cantonese, because we had a Cantonese dialogue coach involved for young actress. And this was going back and forth because there were 8 different scripts also to work on. So she did also evaluating, then feedback from the production. Then there was another round. Going on, we had a Japanese Cantonese audio to do for the Cantonese actress to study Japanese phrases in the film. So all this preparation work we had to do. And then was something which I found very interesting. We had to work with the phonetic alphabet. We had to prepare all the different languages into a phonetic alphabet which sounds German for the German director. So he wanted to know everything what was going on in all the languages. So we had people involved who did the phonetic language to be understood for a German director. That was really very challenging, yes.
I can just imagine. I mean, you say Polish was difficult. I think Cantonese might top Polish. It's probably one of the most difficult languages out there. I lived in Hong Kong for a while, so I never picked up much. So, all right. Well, that what you just described in the phonetics, that's very unique. I don't think anybody else did that ever. So
it was really very, very challenging. And of course, as we always work in a team, so there's always also controlling it again in the end, and then we discuss everything before sending it off. But of course, we had to be very quick because it's like shooting. Then we had schedule, and then we had only maybe 2 days for one language, and already came the other language for the preparation of the next shooting. But it was really very, very well organized, very well, I must admit. That was really production, which I very like to work with. Because the organization was top, really. And in the end, yes, I just want to add one thing. In the end, we worked also on the post-production, the ADR, the additional dialogue recording. This is the process of re-recording the audio in a more controlled environment. In the studio, they did it to improve the audio quality and to reflect also changes in the story in the end.
Complex on all levels. So once you're finished, once you're not in post-production, once you're in the marketing phase, you're gonna submit it to maybe a film festival. So I read that you're also doing applications and dossiers, etc., for film festivals. Services around that. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Is that mostly for Cannes, or I mean, there's global? There's probably 100 film festivals around the world.
Let's say it's like. It's not only for film festivals, but in general, I would say. It's for submissions, presentations, and funding as well. You make a little package for them, the dossier, like with a director's note, producer's note. Then sometimes they have a marketing concept. There they declare also with whom they are co-producing, how does the film development looks like, where it will be produced, the locations, for example, what's the specialty of the film, about post-production, then the special effects, the special heads of department, or if there are children involved, there are also the casting, how the casting of the child actors, the distribution, for example, in German language territories, or international distribution. It goes more in this direction, yes.
Very interesting. So now that we're heading into 2023, 2024, what are some of the plans, projects that you're prioritizing, that you're working on for the rest of the year and beyond?
I think what I would really like to continue is the offer for internships for students. This is really, we do a formation, like I always say, a formation of 3 months, which is really very lovely. It's something which I couldn't do during my studies. That wasn't in the plan of the European Union yet. That's why I really like to offer this to students nowadays. And they're coming from the whole world to us.
Wow.
That's very interesting. And that's also how I maintain my languages, of course, to get them updated and to speak all of my languages almost every day. So this is one point which is really getting to my heart, and I really prefer to continue with this. And then another point is that I would like to reinforce our main team in the office. That's something which I'm looking now for, and as always, as with the people involved who are doing translations for us, I always being very careful of who's coming with us, who's doing the jobs. So I will take my time to see to the right person.
All right. So for anybody that's graduating now in audiovisual translation, drop an email. Liana's there. All right. That was fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Liana. I appreciate it.
Yes, very, very. Thank you too for having the possibility to join you.